last but not least, we're going to kind of jump back a little bit and we're going to mark the cumulative frequency. So notice that the word cumulative is there again, but before we did the cumulative relative frequency. Here we're just doing the cumulative frequency. So we're going to be accumulating just the regular frequency column. So we're kind of jumping back a little. We could have put this next to the frequency column if we wanted. All right. The order in which you display your data is not necessarily important. It's just kind of how whatever the situation is. On My Open Math, you'll see them arranged in different ways, which is why it's so important to pay attention to what you're actually asking for. The process of doing this is the same. It's just we're not going to be adding down the relative frequency column. We're going to be adding down the frequency column because it's just the cumulative frequency. So again, we start with just 3. 3 people answered 2 or less. For the next value, we have the previous plus the current, the previous plus the current frequency. So 8 people said they work 3 hours or less. Because again, we're kind of working our way up. Previous plus the current frequency. So that's 11 people said they worked 4 hours or less in our study. Previous plus the current. Previous plus the current frequency. That's going to be 17 people said they worked what row are we on? 5 hours or less. All right, previous plus the current. That's 23. 23 people said they worked 6 hours. Woo! Y'all, I make mistakes. I do it. We all do it. Bear with me. If you ever notice that I don't catch a mistake like that right there, send me a comment. At least I can write on the video to everyone else until I have a chance to edit it. All right. 17 was the previous. The current for this was 2, not 6. All right. 2 additional people had this next data value. So that's 19. 19 people said they worked 6 hours or less. And finally, 19 plus 1 is 20. 20 people said they worked 7 hours or less. This should be the total number in sample. The total number that we interviewed, all right, should be displayed there. Just like the end of the cumulative relative frequency should be 1. This should be the total number displayed. Now, if I hadn't caught that mistake, this is something actually I'm glad I made that mistake so I can exemplify this. If I hadn't caught that, we did 17 plus 6, that would have been 23. I would have already surpassed the number. 17 plus 6 is 23. I would have surpassed the number of people we interviewed. That should not be possible. All right. The end of all of our addition should end up at how many people were interviewed in the study or how many things were analyzed in the study, because it's not always going to be people. All right. But if you make that mistake, if I noticed like I would have gone to 23, added another, and I would have been at 24 by the end. I go, uh-oh, I made a mistake somewhere. Let me go back and double check my math. Let me go back and double check that the values I'm adding are frequencies and not the data values. You want to add down the frequency column as we're doing the cumulative frequency. So little things to check yourself. It's a beautiful thing about math is that you have these checks and balances along the way, and it's really good and important to know what those are. All right, what % of the students work exactly 4 hours? So I'm just going to ask you a few questions. You'll see on My Open Math that they ask these same things, and we're going to learn what part of the chart we pull this information from. If they're asking for a %, all right, or a proportion, that's going to be the percentage or the decimal value, which means we're either going to be looking at the relative frequency if it's an exact value. So remember, the relative frequency is for that exact data value. They go kind of straight across. The cumulative relative frequency is that value or less. It's everything building up to that. If we want exactly 4 hours, I'll try to color coordinate my chart. Exactly 4 hours is going to be 15%. 0.15 or 15% of the students, because they asked for a percent. How many students work more than 5 hours? All right, ask yourself that. What number for a data value of hours is more than 5? Is 5 more than 5? Those are equal to each other. All right, so being more than 5 is going to be either 6 or 7. We're going to be looking at these two pieces here. And we want the number of students. So I don't want to look at the relative frequency. I want to look at the actual frequency. So 2 worked 6 hours and 1 worked 7 hours. So that's a total of 3 students worked more than 5 hours. What percent of students work 4 hours or less? All right, a couple ways to get to this. Again, with percent, we're looking at the relative frequency. If they're asking for the number of students, you're looking at the regular frequency or the cumulative frequency. Relative frequency is going to give us that percentage. So we are looking at 4 hours or less. The numbers that go with 4 hours or less is 4, because that is equal to 4 or less. So that's 3 and 2. So I can either add up these 3 values, 0.15 plus 0.25 plus 0.15, or it's going to be the same thing as the cumulative relative frequency, because that's what the cumulative relative frequency is doing. It's adding as we go. So as long as it includes all of the pieces above that value, that's what that's going to equal. This is equal to 0.55. Or 55% of students work 4 hours or less. All right, there are a few MyOpenMath questions that ask these little things at the end. If you're still struggling with it, please see me in office hours so that I can give you a few more examples. We can talk through it until you're feeling really comfortable with that procedure. Thanks for sticking with me.